Hi, I'm Mary, a librarian and book reviewer with a focus on stories written for kids, tweens, and teens. Today, I am joined by Alda P. Dobbs, who is the author of Barefoot Dreams of Petra, The Other Side of the River, and her newest book, The Giving Flower. Alda is as passionate about connecting children to their past, their communities, different cultures, and nature as she is about writing. Welcome, Alda. It's so great to have you.
Oh, thank you, Mary. I'm always delighted when I'm being interviewed by you. So thank you so much for making the time.
Of course. I'd love to hear more about your book, The Giving Flower, that's coming out soon.
Sure, let me show it here, the beautiful cover. So Emily Mendoza is the illustrator here, and I think she captured the essence of the flower, the poinsettia, because it's the history of the poinsettia. And the way this story came about is that I knew there was a connection of the flower to Mexico. And I was born in Mexico, but I grew up in the United States. And I'm always trying to make those connections. And then that's when I started digging more into where the flower came from. And it turns out it came from the Aztecs. So I was fascinated by that. That's this flower that's around the world. You see it all over the world, and it's recognized all over the world. And that it started with the Aztecs. To me, that was amazing, and that's what prompted me to do more research about it. So it covers the everything from the Aztecs to the story, the legend of Pepita when the Spanish came to Mexico, to the ambassador Poinsett who went from the United States to Mexico once Mexico became a country, and he's the one that saw the flower, brought it to the United States, and that's why the flower was named after him, Poinsettia or poinsettia, as a lot of people say. And to modern times, how color TV really brought the poinsettia to a lot of homes because of the vibrant colors that people saw on TV. So yeah, a lot of history behind it.
Yeah, and I think it's great how you've put the book together in a way that is the nonfiction history, but it's also accessible to young readers and more in a narrative format. So it blends the two in a really nice way.
Yeah, no, it was interesting because I wanted to, like you said, it was for young readers. So it's a balance beam. You're walking, right? You want to keep the engagement, but at the same time, you want to inform them about the flower. And at the end, so it's short. And I love the opening pages, by the way, here, that the way the art department, the directors did this, and Emily. But you have the short sentences throughout the book, and then at the very back, you have the back matter. You have more details, that goes more in depth into the research and the whys and the names of the poinsettia. And then you also have a timeline of the history of the poinsettia. So it's something that I really liked, that the way they set it up so that like you said, younger readers could be engaged as well.
Yeah, so how did you do the research for this? Was it more book research or did you go places to study the poinsettia? How did you do that?
I started the first time the idea came to me. I had a poinsettia next to me, and I was in the car rider line, picking up my kids, and I looked at the flower, and that's when the question came about, and got on my phone. That's the first thing I Googled the history of that, and then I started going down, books about the flower, websites that dedicated to the flower and whatnot, and I just went from there, bibliographies, follow kind of like going down the rabbit hole and coming up with all these resources, amazing resources out there. I didn't realize how much had been written about this flower, and just extracting that information, going to librarians, because I always tell the story how when I first did the research for Barefoot Dreams of Petra, how I did the research on my own, because as an engineer, I was used to in my past life, I was an engineer person, and I used to do my research by going to the library, going to the stacks, but I never asking librarians for help. I just didn't know you could do that. I thought they were just there to, I don't know, direct people, tell people to get quiet, be quiet, not be so noisy. And after 2.5 years of doing the research for Barefoot Dreams, doing my family for my family story, I didn't find anything, and I was about to quit. And a friend of mine told me, "Well, have you asked the librarian for help?" And I said, "Well, you could do that." I didn't realize you could do that. And they said, "Yeah, that's what they're there for." And I said, "Really? I don't know. They won't get upset if I go, up to them." And they said, "No, they're there for that reason." And so, yeah, Right. That's how I learned that you can make an appointment and they sit with you, and oh my goodness, it was incredible. So I was this close to throwing that story away. And, thanks to that librarian, I was able to go on and pursue the whole story, the whole novel now. And the same with the Giving Flower. I went to the library this time, we're confident, and did the appointment, and I had a librarian help me as well, find the right resources and whatnot to help with the research.
Librarians are good for that. I'm glad that you asked the question.
Yeah.
How long did it take for you to put together this book? I know sometimes with picture books, it can be a little bit misleading how much time they can take to put together.
I would say the research aspect took about 5, 6 months, not that long compared to the novel on the Mexican Revolution. But the writing part, that's what took the longest to put the words correctly. And then I volunteered to do the translation and to do the Spanish version of it. And that one took a little longer because ideas cannot be translated literally sometimes. You have to sometimes rewrite, the concept or whatnot that you're presenting. And the anticipation that you add in English has to be different in Spanish because it doesn't fit. And so, yeah, that took time to come up with that. And like I tell people, I explain people with English, for instance, the body parts. Kids love this because in the body parts in English, you have the word head, knees, back. It's one syllable. They're all one syllable words. But when you do it in Spanish, you have cabeza, espalda, rodilla. So you have three syllables there. So now you have to think differently in order to fit the words together because you have really long words. So you have to train your ear and read a lot in Spanish in order to see that flow from a different perspective, different angle. And that took time, but I think I invested so much time and energy to make sure I had a high quality translated work. And now I feel that I like the Spanish version more than I do the English version. So there you go. So yeah, the Spanish version is called La Flor Generosa, and it'll come out at the same time as the English version.
How fun that you got to do the translations. It's almost like you got to put together your book in two different ways
Yeah,
by doing that. That's so cool. I'll have to read the Spanish one when it comes out also.
that's good.
So, when you first started writing, so your first couple books are middle grade, and now transitioning a little bit into this picture book, do you find that there are things about each type of writing that make them a little bit easier or more difficult for you?
For me, I think it was more difficult because I'm so used to writing the novel, and with the picture book, you're limited in the amount of words you could use. For instance, I think they gave me 700. This is 700 words, I believe, 708. So yeah, each word weighs a lot, and it's like I tell kids, the metaphor I use or compare for a novel, you have a whole playground where you could play or a mural, right? You're painting a mural. You could paint whatever you want in a mural. And with a picture book, you have a stamp. You could just paint that little stamp there. So, you're very limited. Every brush stroke you use in that stamp size, canvas, it has to count. Just here, each word weighs a lot. So you got to make sure you have the right word, in the right place. So to me, to train that part of my brain to think that way, it was a challenge. And I think the fun part, something that I learned was just the amount of work that the illustrator will do to add to the story, to the essence, because it's something, like I said, it's something I learned. I didn't realize just the trust that there has to be there, with the publisher, and that the publisher works with the artist, and that they actually bring the story, the words to life. And it's an incredible thing to see that come about, because you look at the story and it seems like they coexisted all this time together. I don't see any, it's seamless the way they fit the illustrations and the words, the text. And I've been told that by people too, that if I knew the illustrator, they're like, did you and the illustrator know each other? Were y'all good friends or know each other really deep? I'm like, no, I've never met her. I'm hoping I meet her soon, but no, we've never met each other. But yeah, it's amazing how that work comes together like that. So that's something I really appreciate it, from working on this project.
Yeah, wow. That's really fascinating that you've never even met your illustrator, that any communication that you've had has really just been through the words on the page. So I feel like that speaks a lot to those words, that you've been very careful with the selection of them. And so they've been able to be translated into visuals in a really beautiful way. So well done. Seems like you've transitioned well into that picture book arena. Do you feel like at this point you'll consider more picture books, or do you feel like your heart's still in middle grade?
It's both actually. I love middle grade. It always has that sweet spot for me. Picture books, I have so many ideas, but from idea to concept to have the the words, it's difficult. That big jump, you know. And so I have a ton of ideas for picture books, but getting it to flow, that's a really hard work. It's easier for me. It's easier to get a novel going than a picture book. So, but I like to while I'm working on a novel, I like to take breaks between the novel and just play around with a picture book. So that's what happened with this one. I was working on the novel that I'm currently working in, and at one point I was taking a break, and that's when this came to me. So that's something that I like to do in between. And I'm also considering a YA. It's something I want to get my my self into a little bit, start dipping into that. And in the YA I have in mind, it's about a pianist. And I still haven't, I started to research it a little bit on the side, but I started taking piano lessons 2 years ago so I could start learning. I wanted to know what's inside her head, inside the pianist's head. So I figured, okay, the only way I can know what's inside her head is if I'm close to the piano. And I've always loved music. I've never played an instrument, but I've always been passionate about music. And so 2 years ago, while I took my kids to piano classes, I spoke to their instructor and said if I could take piano lessons. And yeah, she's been fantastic. So yeah, this will be my third year taking piano, and I'm starting to get better a little bit here and there. But so it's coming together. So yeah, I'm hoping I could be able to write in those ranges for children from picture book of YA. See how it goes. We'll see.
Absolutely. So you said that in your past life you were an engineer and now you're a writer. So how did that transition come about?
I'd always, hindsight, looking back, I've always been a storyteller. I love stories. Actually, not the storyteller, but I love stories because I've always been very shy as a kid. I was the most quiet kid, you'd meet, and in class, very shy. But I love listening. I loved observing people, listening to chats, seeing people's reactions, and listening to stories. The thing was that English was my second language, and learning it was a little traumatic. I didn't have a patient teacher, and because of that, I had a love-hate relationship with English, and so books were something I didn't like because they were in English. I didn't have Spanish books available. So I never made that bridge, from Spanish to English with books. So I ignored the English books. But I didn't realize there were stories, and that, I would have loved it had I made that connection. And it wasn't until I was 16 years old that I found a book inside a public bus when I was taking it home from work. At night, I was exhausted, and I picked up the book, and it was Catcher in the Rye. And I opened up the book, read it in one sitting, and I was blown away because this was, to me, it was magic. The fact that the author, Salinger, had created a character who was so different from who I was. He was a rich white kid from the Northeast, and I was a Mexican girl from Southside San Antonio, poor as can be. But I felt I was holden, and that's when I said, "This is magical for an author to do this, to make me feel what this character's feeling." And I identified with that character, and that's when the seed came to me about becoming a writer. But my English has never been great, and that confidence, especially that fear of English, has always followed me. And when I started college and took entrance exams, I did really well in math. But English, that test, I bombed it. I did horribly on it. And that's what I told myself, you know what? The universe, is telling me, don't pursue writing. That's not for you. So I put that dream away, and studied physics, went into engineering, but all those years, stories kept coming to me, kept bubbling up in my mind. And it wasn't until in my 30s, my husband and I lived in Italy. The military took us there, and I couldn't find a job in engineering. And that's when he said, well, sit down and write. You've always wanted to write stories. This is your opportunity. And but again, I was so afraid of English. And at that point I realized, okay, I've always been writing. As an engineer, I've been writing proposals, reports for grad school, for grant writing. I've been writing essays, personal statements. Why am I so afraid of writing? I just got to learn how to do it creatively. So that's when I finally sat down and faced that fear. But I tell young people, don't wait till your 30s, do it when you're younger. Don't have that fear. Don't let fear stop you from pursuing dreams or passions. Even if it's on the side, work on it. Don't be so afraid that you just don't touch it anymore. But yeah, that's what prompted me to start writing.
So English is your second language. Do you find that you start writing in English first, or do you write in Spanish first and then translate it? How does that look for you?
I write in English first because I guess I trained my mind to think in English because all my school has been here. So all my writing has been done in English and whatnot. So I'm used to doing that. I have read a lot in Spanish too, growing up, from the Bible and stuff like that. So I have a sense of Spanish, but not until I sat down and did the translation did I say, okay, now I have to read like a writer now. So I had to go back and read text in Spanish, magazines and whatnot, and see how words fit together just to learn how to put the book together. But yeah,
Really?
generally I write in English. Sometimes in dreams. Sometimes I get ideas in dreams or phrases in dreams. And I do have this one picture book that came to me in Spanish, and a rhyme, that came, a little phrase. And so now I want to pursue it in Spanish. And so we'll see. But it's funny how the brain works like that when you're bilingual.
Yeah, how fascinating. That's really cool. Turning back now to the Giving Flower, do you have a favorite moment in that story or a page that stands out in your memory from either working on it or with the illustration connection or anything like that?
I love the illustrations here that she did, because it starts out with the little girl in Guerrero, so you can see the town in Mexico, and then it follows through with the Aztecs. So I love that art that she did too with the Aztecs and working the flower. But my favorite would have to be the story of Pepita, and Pepita was the Spanish, the mestiza girl who an angel appeared to, and she was upset because she couldn't find a gift to take to the baby Jesus at the altar in church during Christmas time. But the angel said, any gift you take, so as long as it's from the heart, it's a good gift. So she picks up these tall weeds and takes them to the church. People look at her funny and give her the eye because she's taking weeds to the baby Jesus. But as she prays, a miracle takes place, and of course, all the weeds turn into poinsettias. They have these stars, these red stars on top of them. So yeah, this is my favorite part of the book, because the way I'm telling the story is a lot. The way I wrote it's a lot better than the way I'm telling it. But just the illustrations, though. I mean, Emily Mendoza did an incredible job in capturing the Pepita story. Just her expressions, the expressions of the people when she took the weeds to the church, those eyes. And when the miracle happened, all this is captured there. So that's probably one of my favorites in the book. And then at the end of the book, once it covers more history, it goes back to the little girl walking home with her poinsettia. And at that point, it talks about finding beauty in everything and in your surroundings. And I think again, Emily Mendoza did an amazing job in capturing that essence too of finding beauty around you. And I think that's what pretty much the cover does that too. Because I love the cover because that's pretty much me. Every time I step outside, I'm always looking up. So I really, when I saw that, I was really moved by it.
Yeah, and I like that the illustrations really they capture the fact that poinsettias bloom in the winter, and so you have kind of that darker quality to the lighting that the nights are darker generally in the wintertime and things like that. And things so much in here that I learned about the poinsettia that I didn't know, even though you see it pretty much everywhere in the winter holidays. So it's nice to have some background to look at with that too. What do you hope that readers will come away with after reading this book?
I think, like I mentioned in the story about seeking the beauty around you, even in a flower, just going out there into the world and seeing what's there, and being curious about it, and just going on and pursuing that, finding out where it comes from, the history behind it, or how to make it better, and give it back to the world. So that's what I hope readers will take away from this book, so that they're inspired to go out there and observe the world around them. And also the connections, making connections. That's something I always aim for in my writings and my books, about making connections with other cultures, with history, with other eras, so that you realize how we're all very similar, despite, what time of period we live or what culture you're from. We're very similar. And I think once we understand that at the core, we share these universal stories, we'll understand each other more, and work together better, which is, I think it's very important that we meet, we understand each other, so that, more gets done when we work together.
Yeah, and it's cool in this book too how you have woven several centuries of history together and the multiple cultures that have transitioned or made the poinsettia into what it is today. So yeah, and I like how that all kind of comes together, that you blend the culture with the history, and then the changing over time, as you say, happens everywhere, and just the interrelatedness of it all is really beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
So, you were mentioned that you have another novel you're working on. Do you want to share any other projects that are actively in the works right now?
Right now, the novel I'm working on the most is it's a middle grade, and it's about a little girl who doesn't know what happened to her mom. She knows she passed away, but doesn't know how or when. She only has one memory of her mom, and her dad doesn't speak about her. Nobody does. And so she's always wondering what would happen to her mom, and she starts finding these notes, and she thinks they may have something to do with her mom, that might explain what happened. And with the help of her friends, they're going to start trying to solve that mystery behind, what happened to her mom, and also why is her dad so quiet and silent? Not only about the mom, but just life in general. So that's what I'm working on right now. So no title yet, but hopefully here soon there'll be one.
Excellent. Well, we'll keep an eye out for that. And what question did I not ask you today that you wish I had?
Oh my goodness, I don't think your interviews are so thorough. I can't think of any other question. You know how they have those lightning speed questions and whatnot. I had one interview like that recently, where they ask you different questions, and one of them what is it readers might not know about you, that's not on your website. And I mentioned, because they came to me, all of a sudden I couldn't think of an answer. I thought one of them was, what I mentioned was that I worked as a mime at one point, and it's on my website. But what I didn't mention is that I was fired. The same day that I worked, I got fired that afternoon, and I got fired because I couldn't stop laughing. And I was laughing out loud. I mean, I should have learned how to laugh like a mime, because I didn't have that. So I just kept laughing, and, I was just out on, putting my hands on my knees, laughing, and that's when they tap me on the shoulders. Okay, you gotta go. You're not cut for this. So yeah, I got fired. But that's one of the things. And then I remember too, another thing is that storm chasing. I used to do storm chasing a lot in college when I was there. So that's something I've always been fascinated with weather. So maybe I could put that in the book sometime in the future.
Oh yeah, that would be fascinating, especially now with all these storms coming through and everything's a little bit more intense, I feel like in recent years. So yeah, do that.
There you
I would love to
go.
read about it. Um, Alda, where can folks find out more about you and your books?
I have my website, and it's my name, Alda, and then my middle initial P, and my last name Dobbs, no period, and just Alda P Dobbs at sorry, .com. I'm saying my email address, but no, .com. And you'll find information there on my books. And if you sign up for the newsletter, I have a quarterly newsletter where I talk about what's coming up behind the scenes. I highlight books, authors, give sometimes I'll give writing advice, and depending on the season and stuff like that, I'll do different things, and I do giveaways as well. So you could probably find more information from the newsletter. Instagram, I'm on Instagram. I'm not as good at about posting stuff. I'm trying to get there, but like I said, the newsletter is better. And if you have any questions as well, you can always contact me via my website too, and I could answer any questions you have or stuff like that. And yeah, and Facebook, I'm gonna start getting into Facebook here soon. As soon as I'm able to recover my account, because for some reason it's not letting me through. So for now, it's Instagram only.
Well, wonderful. We'll definitely check you out there. Thank you so much, Alda, for your time today. And listeners, if The Giving Flower sounds like a great fit for you, I hope you look for it wherever you get your books. Thanks so much, Alda, and all the best to you with this launch.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Mary, for having me here. Appreciate it.